some kind.
Hey, it says we're live. How exciting. Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. Welcome,
So it says.
YouTubers. It does.
But on my
Integrated
screen, it
into
doesn't
Zoom.
say if anything's happening yet. Redirecting to YouTube.
Uh,
Oh
you know
yeah,
what? Let's jump on YouTube and find
we
out.
are we are live.
We're
We
so
are
live.
live.
That's so exciting.
It doesn't really give you much warning.
It's just like, here you are.
But I can now moderate some comments.
This is great.
Although,
Yeah, I'm going to
why does
jump
it
on as well.
seem that it's live on my YouTube and not on Accent? I'm not sure.
Ooh, we're live on Evan's channel. Oh, yeah. Ooh.
Is that true?
I
That's
can
not
see
what
that
I
the.
picked.
Let's see if we can. Well, I'm on something. There are 10 people watching,
Yeah,
apparently.
but whose
That's so
page are we
exciting.
on? No,
We
we're
are
on
officially on
Accent. We're
Accent.
on
We
Accent.
are.
Okay, cool.
This is great.
But it's
We
like
can tell.
authenticated as me to do the commenting. Let me switch that.
Hey,
Hey,
Justin.
everybody. We're just, messing around. All right, let me get a link to this. And
Yes, let's do it. Yeah, we. This was a little impromptu. We were going to go live on Facebook, but due to all kinds of wonderful technical difficulties, here we are on YouTube instead, and we're going to
yeah,
share it.
yeah. And
Hi,
how
Ivy.
do I share this now? I don't know.
Might be a
Should
good
be a
old
link
fashioned
of some
Control
kind.
C, Control
I think
V.
I figured that out. Okay. So I'm gonna
The
share that link.
the do it. And for those who are joining us, the agenda for this little impromptu live hang is talking a little bit more about our recently released EP, which if you haven't checked it out, I very much recommend checking it out. It was definitely a big labor of love. But we're here to field questions, talk a bit. Evan and I want to catch up as well, so why not do
Yeah,
that
I know.
publicly?
We could just like have a conversation in front of thousands of our closest friends.
Exactly, exactly, which I'm all for.
Okay, I just shared that, and that's great.
Yes.
So yeah, so how you doing, man? What's been going on over there in England?
Oh, I'm doing good. Not much, to be honest with you. I mean, we're, you know, usual lockdown things, but I've been keeping as busy as I can be and as musical as I can be. I'm still recovering from putting out our album as well, in its own way. So,
What does
and
that
we're
mean? Were you like
well. I
flat
think in the
out
lead,
after that?
I was a bit. I don't know. I think it's because it's been sitting on my mind a lot. Like this EP that had actually been in the work for about like a year and a half, really, from conception to release. So
Yeah,
it was a lot
I was
longer.
trying to remember when like the idea actually started. I
Yeah.
remember we were on tour listening to demos. Uh, which tour was that? Like it was at least the
Whew.
previous summer.
Yeah,
Maybe
I think it
maybe it was
could have
even
been the
before that.
European. Yeah, well, yeah, about about 1.5 years ago, right after I was teaching at Acapella Academy, and I think that like was a pure injection of acapella energy, and right after that, I just started playing around with some ideas, and obviously there was a big gestation period. And then yeah, I played you some demos around when we next met, whenever that was, or it could have been yeah,
I
in
think
the
it
in the
was
fall.
either spring or summer 2019
Yeah,
where you
yeah, yeah.
actually had the whole thing, almost the whole thing demoed out because we weren't sure about like the last track, I think, if I recall. It was a different
Yeah, which
idea
ended up
instead of Blackbird, I think, originally, which I don't remember what it was.
yeah, it was Let It Be. It was going to be another
Ah,
Beatles
yeah.
one,
Yeah,
um,
different Beatles.
but I had a bit of an epiphany and I went with Blackbird down the line, which of course then Resound joined us for. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was
I
it,
mean,
it was
I
quite
definitely want to get back to the topic of collaborations and kind of how that
yeah
all sort of came about and with your ideas in our group. Um,
yeah
but yeah, I
it
mean,
was
sometimes I mean the way you work, like I think for me and probably the others in the group, it's like a little bit more transparent the way some of the other arrangers work. And I think
mm,
we see a little bit more like nuggets of the process. And for you, it's like you don't seem to have gone anywhere, but then one day you emerge and you're like, I have this thing and it's like totally figured out. And I mean that
mm,
not just in this case of this EP, but like in general, even if it's just like one chart that you're working on or whatever. And
yes
like we don't know where you've been that you were able to do that. Like, I don't know. It's not just these musical projects too, but other things you've worked on in the past too. But like,
That's sweet of you.
I don't know how you can characterize that experience of like,
Yeah.
where are you when that happens, and how much time are you spending in a day or a week or a month on this stuff, and what's it look like? It's a lot of
Yeah.
questions.
No, it's funny. It's funny to see it from your side, looking at me just emerge from, I guess, what seems like just a shroud of mist, and then here it is. Here's the arrangement. Because for me, I don't know. For me, it's a bit of a blur too. My process is often I will just totally get immersed in something, and I will just like go at it in a very sort of like all other priorities will get shifted. I get very focused in on an idea, and I just love to explore it as far as I can independently, um, which is a blessing and a curse. I sometimes find collaboration quite difficult, and I think the project almost came out of you guys saying like, "Hey, we've had some," because the Christmas project was so collaborative, and there's so many thoughts, and I remember just thinking, there's so many other things I wanted to try, and the other guys in the group were so generous to say, why don't you just go and just like get that out of your system and see what happens, and then see if any other thing takes form, which I think is why the project was also quite different, and all of it was written and arranged in a very similar time period as well,
Yeah.
with the exception of the
I mean,
last
we'd
one I did.
said for a while, like, let's have this concept at some point where it's James Rose produces accent,
Mm,
um, and didn't really define what that meant. But since you've had these other you know recording personas, and your whole kind of electronic pop electronica career, and
mm,
wanting to give more space to bring in those influences and say like, we don't care if it sounds like accent or not, it's just going to be like a different type of production. In my opinion, in
mm,
the end, it's still sort of what is like very obviously an accent project. And I was
yeah.
expecting people to maybe respond and say this was the like, I don't know whether it was positive or negative, but just sort of say like, this was really really not what I expected or something. And nobody really did that, but maybe it's because we've
Mm.
hinted at some of these things before
I
through
think
other
I think that's
arrangements
it.
you've done for sure.
Yeah, I was very relieved with the responses. I think that was half of the pressure for me, was just like, I hope people dig it, because in my head it did feel very different. But I suppose maybe some people see it as one extreme of the extreme of accent sound. Maybe the other being the very like meticulous, you know, sort of JB Oh Holy Night is maybe on the other side, or A Song for Jean, where it's almost like every chord is sort of, I don't know. There's like a, I don't know how you describe it. It's just very placed and perfect. And I feel, at least in my head, this album, the process to writing it was so much more messy. It was a very messy process. Hence why, like, although the structure is 6 part, there's so many moments that are like 40 part or 100 tracks or something, just
Yeah.
to capture more of a feeling. It was much more, it was more
What was
free
messy
flowing.
about it? Like messy for you, like you felt it was messy during the creation, or
Yeah, yeah. In that sense,
we
it
made it
does.
messy?
No, not at all. Yeah, you definitely structured it, but the creation process is much more like my electronic music, which is far more like throwing paint to the wall and seeing what sticks, as opposed to traditionally. I always feel like arranging can be a bit of a subtractive process, because you've got this whole song and then you're trying to distill it to 6 strict parts. Whilst this, I let myself go, and that was part of the concept behind it, of like, what if I don't really think about how many parts? Obviously, harmonically, I want to lean on some of the stuff we've done in the past and the 6 part stuff, and there are moments like that in No More Blues. But overall, it was much more of an additive. Is that the word? Process, where
Additive.
the additive process, before editing it, where I just sort of like threw a lot more, sort of just on the Pro Tools page. There was no score. Scores were done like retrospectively by other people. And so in my head, it's a bit more messy, but then it starts to take form. I think that's the exciting part, is when you're experimenting and then you're throwing out ideas and adding ideas, and then suddenly something a little bit deeper or more emotional starts to take form. And I think that was the real core of it, is to find those emotional, uh, yeah, centerpieces, these
So
power chords.
in that sense, like, did you think of your role as an arranger differently from even other arranging projects you've had, or did you kind of still approach like the vocal arranging aspect exactly how you always would, but just
Mm.
over arrange so you would have more kind of like recorded bits to play with and post,
Mm.
as we might say.
Yeah, I think the process was a lot different. It was definitely giving myself permission to play with as many parts as possible, and I think harmonically and how I approached reharmonization for some of these things is the same. And I think some of that's instinctual now at this point. There's just some chords that I love, um, and but then the way that I built upon it and reinforced some emerging ideas or vocal riffs or um, even sometimes just trying to draw it away from sounding too much like a vocal line. I think that just that concept was really important for me because I think I wanted it to lean in more of an electronic soundscapey, but with the voice as the paintbrush. So there are a lot of times where like I would ask for like less dynamics or do less dynamics or layer something up so it doesn't sound like one specific person because I think that was just a unique color that I wanted to play with where it's just like all our voices but sort of all together in this cooking pot and so that led to arrangements that were far more expansive and free and it wasn't like Danny's going to do this very specific part but really like he's going to provide this layer and
Yeah, I mean, for
um
anyone who's watching, like what was a bit different in terms of for us to record it, we had, at, yeah, as James said, some of the things we got sort of scored retrospectively from the
mm,
recorded demos. But in general, like when James arranges, we have full demo audio files that we can listen to and kind of learn by rote and then re-record. But in this case, for most of us, we had kind of multiple tracks to listen to, and some of the tracks might have very little on them. Like might be just like a handful of bars for one section of the song or something, but it's overlapping with other things. So there's
mm,
people, we all took turns singing, sometimes multiple parts that then were used simultaneously in the final mix. So yeah, it was a little bit different, in the sense that we weren't learning like a through composed arrangement and then trying to kind of nail that. But at the same
mm,
time, like we always try to apply good vocal group technique and learn,
yeah so,
get
yeah,
nice full phrases recorded and
mm,
not do too much punching and stuff like that. But it was like,
totally.
I know for me, because I'm mostly covering the bass, I probably got off easy in this project. I often had one, maybe two tracks to listen to, but in like I think it was like Danny 6.
Right, yeah, exactly. In some ways, to me also it was a little bit naughty, like allowing me to do all the things that I kind of wanted to do that I probably wouldn't bring to a performance that we would do live. Even philosophically, how we perform. Like there was this the trouble with us is like you have two bass parts that sort of like hock it with each other as opposed to like integrating that into one bass line. So there's a lot where I'm leaning on the production as well, like some chords that I would never have used or even some takes I wouldn't have used if not for the fact that I also mixed it, which was really fun and interesting because I normally don't do those together. So in some ways, like that's why it's hard to. I almost don't feel like the arranger in that sense. It was like it was the production that was doing so much of the heavy lifting for me with
Yeah,
this,
yeah. I mean, it's
which
a good point
validated
about
it
the
a lot.
bass line in Trouble with Us, where like you could say it's sort of cheating, in the sense that like if you listen carefully to the bass line, they're like, yeah, it's no secret really. Like I actually recorded it in multiple tracks and then kind of smushed them into
Yeah,
one
yeah.
bass line. But you could say like that's cheating because I couldn't do that live or split my voice in two or whatever. But
Mm,
if you think of like the goal here is to be sort of an electric bass, and like you can play two bass strings at the same time. So
yeah.
sometimes that's a
That's
purposeful effect to have like them ring over each other versus not. So
That's it. That's it. It was like, and it was hard. It was really hard for me to explain it to myself and to the group in the early days of like, that was like a conceptual shift where this isn't the album that necessarily proves our raw 6-part tuning, intonation, energy, which has been explored on stage and in other albums, which I love. And that's quite controversial because I feel like that's one of the things we're known for. Like we love the rawness of how we perform and the focus on good vocal technique, on great intonation and ensembleship. But this was the opposite of that. And there were times where I was like, I actually prefer that. Like, I don't want this to be perfectly in tune because it's conveying this topic. And so the focus was shifted purely on like the listening headphones 4-track concept EP philosophy, which was much more about immersion and about the
Yeah.
storytelling. Hopefully that.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, we've always kind of heard like our closest kind of friends in the industry who are either musicians or, you know, producers or managers themselves. You know, I think the bit of recurring feedback that we get like after a show or something like that is, you know, you got to figure out a way to like hook people who aren't necessarily all about this vocal group purity that you guys are, and this kind of close harmony jazz stuff that you guys are, because that can, you know, unfortunately exhaust people. Maybe our like no our top fans would never be exhausted by that, just as we probably never are either. But it is a
Yes.
piece of feedback that like we've had to take seriously, and I like the idea that you know, of trying to figure out what's the balance of something that doesn't compromise like our values around like being a vocal group and not just being a bunch of singers, or you know, not just being like a produced machine. Like balancing
Yes.
that with like how can we still have some pop sensibility. I mean, one thing that just stands out very easy to me is like the fact that these songs on the EP have repetition to an extent that we don't have typically in our arrangements. Like we almost never do a chorus the same way twice in our arrangements,
Yeah.
even if it's just one chord that changes, which I love that. Like that's what, in contrast to like top 40 pop, you know, that's what I want it. I want that. Like that's the jazz mentality I like. But
Yeah.
you know, at the same time, it's a bit refreshing to be like, this is a singable chorus where when you get to it, if you like it, you're gonna want to hear it again the same way, you know.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't think that takes anything away from it if it's still good music. So as a
Yeah.
listener to I guess all of this is to say, like, as a member of the group, this is the first time I've been able to actually listen to one of our projects pretty close to just a listener. Um,
Mm,
I was removed enough from the process, even though I sang on it and heard it at every step in the production.
mm.
Like I was still removed enough that like I can turn on the EP and listen to the full 13 minutes or whatever in order and be like, I kind of get what it must be like to not have created it and listen to it, which we usually
That's
can't
cool.
do, you know.
That's true. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that, and it's interesting to hear your reflections on it as well, because obviously, I mean, for those who are watching, you can probably guess that this was all done virtually. So there
Yeah.
was a lot, that it was hard to necessarily always know how people were feeling about this bit or this change. So we did our best. We're very communicative, but
Yeah. I mean,
it's really
best
great.
laid plans. We were
Yeah,
because it was only 4 tracks before lockdown and coronavirus were a thing. You know, original idea was like, well, at least have the Europeans come together and go to
yeah,
London for a weekend and knock out the entire thing because it's only 4 tracks. And of
yeah.
course,
Right,
like
right.
this whole thing almost tanked because we
Mm,
we wanted to do it that way, and then we kind of ended up just back where we normally are recording remotely.
yeah.
But we know how to do that by now.
Totally. No, but
Yeah.
I really, it's an interesting point how you say like there's much more repetition as well on this album, which I definitely thought about that a lot, especially in No More Blues at the end, where like I repeated it far more times than is good for a mature person to do. But I acknowledge that, and it's I think it's part of, as you sort of alluded to, the immersion of the records, where I don't necessarily want people to be going like, oh wow, what's this new thing and this new thing, and it's more like just people sit back and sort of get the overall story or
Yeah.
picture or vibe.
I mean, of
So
course, No More Blues is probably the most accenty thing on the
yeah,
album, and even just the form of it is going to prevent you from having a totally pop, like repetitive chorus approach, because it's
yeah,
a, you know, it's a not even AABA or whatever. It's like whatever
yeah. It's like
A
A B C
one,
and then
A
D because of.
two, yeah,
It's funny with that one. I actually like when I was in the arranging process, I arranged it for the first time ever, like completely back to front. So I started with the end and then did the chorus, no more blues, I'm good, with the homophony, and then did the verse, and then did the, oh
Mm,
sorry, the pre-chorus, then the verse, then the. So I just worked totally backwards, whilst
yeah,
Blackbird was totally forwards, which is, I don't know. I like playing with that sometimes. It can yield different results, but
yeah.
yeah.
So talk a little bit about like how you approached working with the guests on this album, and if I recall, it wasn't a straight line of like who the guests are going to be or even which songs are going to have guests versus not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we juggled around a lot of different options, which I thought was really fun, because I think so many, it would have been wonderful to hear Women of the World on, you know, a Blackbird, or on No More Blues even. It was really interesting. I think it was just a very fun process to think about who we would love to involve, and then also what song they would shine best on. Um, and it was definitely a back and forth, and I sometimes lent on them. I would send them the 4 songs and see which one resonated. But I mean, I first connected with Resound at Acapella Academy, and they were so lovely. And hearing what they could do with this powerful 3-part harmony, and then accompanied by the our undertones and atmosphere, it was definitely, I was leaning either towards Over You or Blackbird, either way, and they fell in love with Blackbird when they heard it, and they
oh,
were
so
like,
you did you give them both to listen to?
I gave them both,
Oh
yeah,
wow, I didn't know that.
totally, yeah, because I sort of like leaning, I think, on if they get super inspired, which is the same as what I think you guys let me do
Yeah,
as well, of like follow
yeah,
that inspiration. But I think at the back of my mind I was hoping they would do Blackbirds, because it's such an anthemic song, and I knew they would deliver that in a way that connected right. um and yeah, they smashed it. It was, yeah, it
yeah.
was.
I got a little scared maybe that we'd lose them because then they ended up on America's Got Talent and going quite far in
Yeah,
the in the
yeah,
contest, and I was like, if they don't record soon, then they might be too busy. But I
yeah.
was really, it was just I was pleased that they wanted to still be a part of it, and
They're
yeah, they're
such
just yeah,
lovely, like
amazing.
lovely humans, and also incredibly hardworking as well. Like, and I think it shows in what they do. Definitely, people check them out. Resound are amazing, and that was definitely like, well, all 3 of the collaborators were like, you know, what's the what's the words? Like, I wanted to collaborate with them. They've been on my bucket list of collaborators for a while.
Yeah, and of course we met
Um,
Trey McLaughlin. I mean, it's maybe not a predictable collaboration for us, and he comes from the
mm,
gospel music world and everything. But he seems to have like gotten himself embedded in the world of like international vocal music festivals. So we met
yeah,
him at the
yeah,
Aarhus
right,
Festival in Denmark, and
yeah.
did like one collaborative performance with him on stage, and just kind of kept in touch.
Yes, and he's just amazing. His energy is just unmatchable, and his spirit too that he brought to that track. And he's so open to it as well, because it was quite a different song for us as well. It was quite a.
Yeah, different for us, and of course, like he mostly does religious music, so I don't know what his thoughts are on pop and stuff. I never talked to him about it, so
Yeah, yeah. But he, and he did his own thing as well. Like, it was
yeah,
great fun working with him, and he was super open minded to the overall plan of the song as well. So yeah, and lastly, Women of the World are just, I'd written for them. They'd reached out to, I think, us before, looking for some all different particular collaborative avenues. I did an arrangement for them about 2 years ago, and we invited them back, after thinking, because also we just, I was really excited to play with, like, the female voiced groups, and explore harmony that we normally wouldn't dare to touch in these vocal
yeah,
range, and with this vocal style, and with this energy, and yeah, Women of the World and what they represent as well, and how they sing. They just pour love and energy and emotion into everything, and so they were actually a super easy choice for Over
yeah.
You, looking back.
And
um
we have a sort of thematic tie-in with them, given that we're both internationally
yeah.
comprised groups. Although they
uh
do they do something that we don't really do exactly, which is, they really embrace the multiculturalism in their whole persona, the show. We
Mm,
sing in each other's languages at times. We still have 2/3 of the group being native English speakers, and all kind of coming from a Western music tradition, but they have non-Western music traditions
yeah,
in their heritage. So they can kind of
yeah,
do something that we don't do. So it's
right,
that's not showcased on Over You, but this is just to say that you should check out Women of the World, because they're
totally.
quite talented and creative. So
And I think, again, I sort of stayed out of their way when it gets. I was like, here's the vocal parts, and sent them a rough, sketch of the 3-part harmony. But I was really like, however you wish to perform this, like, please, please do, please bring whatever you feel. Will set this song in the space, in this kind of emotional and mean like, yeah, connected space for them, so that it means something for them. And I think that's been important as well. That was a big decision why I kept Chega de Saudade No More Blues in English as well, since I was doing the lead on that, and I really wanted to be able to connect with it and do my own thing with it. Of course, whilst honoring some of the more the intricacies of course, the Brazilian uh, style that it originates from. But yeah, doing my own thing with it was I think very important, so that I could connect with it. And I love the song, I love the melody, it's a masterpiece, and to do my own thing
yeah,
was so much fun. So
I just love the sound of low the low vocal in their group, like their bass or whatever, if you want to
yeah,
call it that. But it's just a timbre that we can't explore too well.
yeah, that's an
Um,
interesting point. Yeah, the highs and the lows, it's just
yeah,
different.
I mean the highs are like that's in an obvious way, but
Mm,
yeah, I don't know. That stands out to me,
yeah,
about that track in a good way.
that's true. And it made it
Um,
fun to mix as well. It was just having all these different um, you know sort of sounds and colors to play with inside Pro Tools, and just see what happens if I throw this over here, or try this reverb thing.
yeah,
I think it was a bit more experimental, for better or worse. But
yeah,
I'm happy with the result.
me too. I also just want to say that this was a cool experience for me because James, you took over like nearly all of the administrative um, responsibilities for the album too. Like you really kind of operated as the executive producer. Um, everything from handling all the communications with the guests. Um, a great deal of the kind of technical aspects of kind of managing session files and all of that stuff, hiring the mastering engineer. Like all four of our previous records were mastered by the same person, and we love him. Um,
Yes.
and he's not a vocal music guy. I think it's one thing that helps us stand out a little bit from the vocal music world. No disrespect to the greats in a cappella um, mastering, but we have someone who's like has a different breadth of experience, and I think that served us well. But then
Yes.
James, you've been used to working with this other person for your non-acapella projects as well, and I think that helped because you also had that relationship that you could kind of build on. But
Yeah.
again,
He
it's
put.
just sort of like creates a different vibe in inexplicable ways that just have a different person handling that aspect of it.
Yeah,
So
because
he had
obviously
a different
Evan.
approach as well.
Yeah, that's be interesting to hear your reflections on that. But of course, like because you're normally team captain in that way, and you do such a great job of it. And there were certainly times where I was like, "What should we do, Evan?" And you've been very supportive and encouraging for me to
Is
just
it
take.
email them again?
Yeah, yeah. Just you
It's
just
like
was straight up,
usually
and it was great.
not that wise.
No,
Yeah,
no, but it's
I
good for
didn't
me to
hear back.
especially.
What should I do?
Well, that's it. And but also I wait. It feels like sometimes I'm waking up from the creative process if I'm still mixing or if I'm still arranging or whatever, and I'm just like, you know, drool everywhere and can't speak English, and
Yeah.
it's a disaster.
Well, it was a
So the
relief for me to like just sort of mentor that, but not have to do it all. And I think it helped.
yeah, no,
There's been a
good
lot
you.
going on in everybody's lives this past year, and
Yeah,
I didn't really have a lot of the focus needed to handle those things.
yeah. Well,
So it was
you did
helpful.
great to encourage me to do that, and it was great. You definitely refocused me so I could. They were like putting on different hats. I think of okay, now I need to
Yeah, yeah,
try and get all
definitely.
this across.
It's
But that's
right
why
brain, left brain.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I think it was nice to work with Michael, who was my mix guy who I've worked with my other projects like Terrain with, because he is now very familiar with how I write emails in the throes of trying to get cool information across. So he really got me on that side,
Yeah,
and I think he really did a great job with putting up with how I
yeah.
write
Also,
emails.
like
So
he did some things that are we haven't had previously in the mastering, which um, I think he's coming from a different in part of the industry in terms of his mindset. And the masters we got back had, the normal masters that of course you all can hear, but then had kind of an a cappella stem and an instrumental stem, which might sound strange considering we're like an a cappella group. But there's
yeah,
like, versions that don't have any leads in them, which I understand if like you're trying to get your music placed in TV and film, they might ask for that stuff because maybe they need to loop a section of something and they can't do it if they have a lead on top of it. And so it makes you a little bit more industry ready.
mm,
So I think it's nice because normally I would have had to go back out again and ask for those other things.
yeah,
I
yeah,
have a
right.
couple of questions here
Yeah, I noticed.
from Brandon James. Brandon James asking James, how much time did
Great
you
name.
put into each or into arranging each tune on average?
And I wish I had timed myself sometimes, but then I'd always feel the pressure of the clock. I am quite fast these days. I think when like an idea hits me, or when I find like a rich vein, a strong idea. I think like No More Blues probably came together in about I'm gonna say 6 to 7 hours is my guess. I think how long it took. But
Wow.
Blackbird was even quicker. I think Blackbird came together in about 3 hours. But then something like Over You has been through a massive process. Like I first wrote that years ago. Again, that was for Terrain, and it didn't make my album, so I decided to recreate that in a setting that would be, I think, really appropriate for the album. And then that took a lot longer because that was so iterative, and so I'd say that was definitely probably closer to 10 or 11 hours. Although it doesn't sound like it would be. But yeah, that one took a lot longer. So yeah, I'm quite quick, I suppose. But I don't think that's a sign of anything because there are still some songs that I'm incredibly proud of that take like weeks. Like I'll leave it, I'll bench it off, and then I'll come back to that. So I don't think there's a right or wrong, or that the speed is particularly indicative of anything. Um, yeah, yeah, that one came
And we
together
have
quick.
from Ollie Lambert, we kind of touched on this a bit earlier. Did you choose your collaborators for this EP before, during, or after the writing process? So yeah, it was a bit of a
Yeah.
mixture, I guess.
Yeah, I think we've Accent's always had an idea of people we would love to collaborate with, and I think without a doubt, all these people have been on the list, and we definitely collaborated with Trey and Women of the World in different senses on stage and in arranging. But yeah, I think as the songs took shape, then it was like, well, okay, who might best fit this song? Maybe both of these will. Should we throw them, see if they're available, see if they're into it? So yeah, I think a lot of it was after the writing process. Um, Oddly, yeah,
Yeah. And there were
yeah,
some ideas that we tried to pursue for collaborators that didn't work out either. So hopefully in the future. So
yeah,
won't
and it's
name
because
names,
also,
but
yeah, right, and also I think because like it wouldn't, you know, it'd be interesting to see how the writing process changed if I did know, okay, Resound are going to be on this one from the beginning. But I think with these arrangements, I did, at the Genesis, I did I left a lot open that I could continue to change and adapt um, when the collaborators did their thing. So yeah, I should say like when Resound sent me back the files, I continued to tinker the arrangement. There were still things that I changed based on what they'd done, added different things. So it. Yeah, I think that's maybe an important thing to highlight is I made sure that they still fit in. They weren't
yeah,
just sort of like an extra little thing, but I rebuilt it and mixed around them and arranged a few extra bits.
definitely. Yeah. Well, we'll probably wrap it up here in a moment, but I think like there's a
Yeah.
lot here for other conversations, which which we also discuss in the group a lot. Like all these things just sort of call into the question, call into question what is producing and what is arranging. We have these discussions a lot within the group, and I don't think there's a right answer. And sometimes it can like come across as like we're trying to each argue a point about it, but at the same time, I feel like we have an appreciation that like it's not a clear cut answer, and you know, like is it producing, is what you're doing about like hearing something come back and then rearranging and re-recording things and moving things around to fit what you already heard recorded, like is that arranging? Is it
Right.
producing, like what is it? And then some of this kind of, not in a great way, comes into debate or question when we talk about like awards, and you have these award categories for best arranging or whatever, and we have a lot, I'm, as not being one of the really primary arrangers in the group, I can say like I feel really privileged to be around all these great vocal arrangers in accent, and I want them to be recognized for it. But when you think about like what are the qualifications for arranging, like what are the criteria for
Yeah.
having a best arrangement, and if you look, for example, like who the nominees are in the Grammy category for this year, if we just say that, well, that helps us to define what arranging is, it turns out it's pretty broad, because the nominees this year are not like traditional pen to paper arrangers. Hey, I figured out exactly this orchestration. From what I can tell, it's like,
Yeah.
these are up for this award because it sounds, what they recorded sounds good, so it must have been figured out really well, regardless of whether that was like in advance, during, in post. You don't know
Yeah.
when those decisions were made.
So true.
So you don't know if it was like bar 34, the bass is going to do this.
Yeah. That's
So
a
is it
really interesting
arranging
point.
if like it was improvised, or if somebody cut it from another track and put it here?
Yeah,
So
yeah, right. Because yeah,
we
like,
talk
and there's
about
so
this
many
stuff a lot.
different ways to arrive at an arrangement as well. Like I could, what if I just cut up? What if I'm a sampler? Like, and I decide to just sample all these different voices, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so, is it based on the results or the process? I suppose, but it's
Yeah.
super interesting. And
I mean, I think in 1985, like that wouldn't have been, something like that wouldn't be nominated for an award, but I think in 2021 it is.
yeah,
So,
yeah, that's
we'll
cool.
let you all decide. It's not,
Yeah,
I don't like have any moral issue about this. It's just an interesting discussion when you, like, if you have to constrain something by words and definitions, where do you come out from that? Is it even like, do you even need to do it, or can it just all be music? Why do we only have genres, I think, to commercialize things. So
yeah,
who cares
right.
if it's pop, jazz, a cappella, vocal music, choral? I don't know.
That's it. I think yeah, the EP definitely falls in between the cracks of a lot of different things. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's part of the fun, I suppose.
Well, we'll talk more again soon, I think. And I need to get back to my other life. And there's also a lot going on in the US today. So,
So I've heard.
yeah,
Ah,
maybe I'll turn on
woo.
the TV and see what's going on.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us.
Yeah,
And thank you for the
thanks. We'll
questions.
leave
And
it up so people can check it out later. And it's great to talk to you, my brother.
you too.
Sending
And I'll
my
see you
best
soon.
across the Atlantic.
Likewise. Super likewise. Yeah.
Take
Yay.
care for
Such a
now.
lovely chat. Bye all.
Bye
Bye, Evan.
bye.